Okay, are we going to start recording?
Yeah.
Okay, we are recording. It's 2:00. Time to begin this meeting of the Ashland County Planning Committee. It's Tuesday, June 17. The Planning Committee is meeting here in the courthouse with access via Zoom. I can see that Gary Mertig is on. Are you there, Gary? Can you hear us? Gary, can you hear us? We cannot hear you. Okay, we'll wait on that. So first item is roll call. And hopefully Gary will come in because we need him for a quorum.
George Bousset,
Here, use your mics, please.
Bradley Ray, Elizabeth Franick, here. Pat Kinney,
Here.
Gary Mertig, Gary, can you hear us?
Continue with the roll call, please.
Pat. Dan Grady, Lissa Radke, here. And Charlie Ortman.
We're going to pause the roll call for a minute. I'm going to try to call Gary, see if we can get a quorum up. Okay.
Brad Ray just walked
Bradley
in.
Ray is here, so we have a quorum. And I'll just give it. Okay.
This is Gary.
Okay.
Gary's online.
Thank you.
Mary Jo's online.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so it appears that we have a quorum. That's good news. So the next item up is the approval of the agenda. Are there comments or suggestions regarding the agenda? Anyone? Anybody online? Gary? Brad? Okay, no comments. Did I hear a motion to approve the agenda, please?
Brad Ray, so moved.
Brad Ray, motion to approve the agenda.
Pat will second.
Pat Kinney, a second for the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So the agenda is approved. Next, we move on to item 3, which is public comments. Is there anybody online who would like to make a public comment? Is there anybody present who would like to make a comment? Second call for public comments. Last call for public comments at this time. Hearing no request for public comment, we move on to item number 4, which is approval of the minutes of the last meeting, which was May 12. And I've just asked Carisha to note that Lissa Radke cannot be 2 places at the same time. So you are listed as a present, but also as an other present. So we're making your other presence adjusted. Any other comments? Any other comments on the minutes of the last meeting? Okay, can we have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting? Liz
Franick.
Motions to approve.
Motion approve.
Second.
Brad will second.
Brad Ray, second. Motion to approve the minutes. Is there discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None of the negatives. The minutes of the prior meeting are approved. Then we're moving on to discussion items, which is 5A. First discussion item is little fun facts or favorite things about Ashland County, contributions by any or all committee members. Are there any committee members or persons present who would like to bring out a fun fact? Listen. Use your mic, please.
Yep, I'm just figuring that. I'll give you one, but I think you probably know it. What's the second tallest? I'm gonna start over. What's the tallest part in Ashland County? Tallest point? Mount Whittlesey in the Porcupine Mountains. That is the 8th tallest point in our whole state. It's only 79 feet shorter than the tallest point, which is Timms Hill in Price County. So we're at 1,872 feet tall at Mount Whittlesey in the Porcupine Mountains. I think that's pretty cool.
Where's it located?
Mount Whittlesey is in the Porcupine Mountains.
Porcupine Mountains are up by Ontonagon, that's Michigan.
What am I saying? Pinocchio.
Okay, in the Pinocchio Range.
That's a fun fact. It's the Pinocchio
Okay.
Range in Ashland County.
Okay, I have two. And the first part of this starts with a little context, and then I'll get to the actually interesting point. So, see. In 1664, the great interpreter and trader Nicolas Perrault was probably with canoes from Lake Superior that came to a dramatic and pagan-like halt at the little settlement of Three Rivers, halfway between Montreal and Quebec. He and his Indian companions, so he had Native American guide companions, had beaten off two attacking parties of Iroquois, and their canoes were piled high with furs, so they'd come back from the Superior, from the upper Midwest. So it is small wonder that they sang songs of victory, shot off their guns, and otherwise impressed 4 companies of soldiers just arrived for the first time from France. When the Indians returned to their homes, a cultured and vigorous Jesuit missionary accompanied them, Father Claude Jean Allouet. He made his way to the foot of Chequamegon Bay, where 7 different tribes were then living in a little settlement. There he built a bark chapel and a hut for himself. He worked long and hard without too much success. And in the spring of 1667, he decided to visit the Nipissing tribe, then in the area north of Lake Nipigon. It's from a book by Grace Lee Nutt, I think published about 1944, called Lake Superior. Then here's another little Ashland County fact from 1996. The Ashland Landing handled 31,000 cords of pulpwood shipped directly on rail in 1996, 48,675 cord overall from Ashland region. 1996, before the pulp hoist closed, I think. Yeah. Any other interesting fun facts? Liz?
Well, everybody knows I work with the public and nobody can pronounce Chequamegon. And I work at the Chequamegon Family Restaurant, and I tell them that comes from the Anishinaabe Ojibwe word Shiwamakum, which means shallow waters or place of shallow waters or sandy shores. Also, a nice fact about my family is my great-grandpa Samuel Seedstra worked with the Bad River tribe way back in time and helped start the first Bad River powwow, which was a Bad River fair. So I'd like to find out more information about that. Thank you.
Any other contributions? The shallow waters, I think the boaters all this spring would agree with shallow waters because having a hard time getting their boats in the water.
This is
So,
Mary Jo.
go ahead.
I don't have an additional contribution, but when Lissa was talking about Mount Whittlesey,
That's actually located southeast of Mellon. So, and it's almost halfway in between Lake Galilee and Highway 77. So if you were going to head east out of Mellon along Highway 77 and you look to your south, that's where Mount Whittlesey is located up in the Pinocchio Hills there. And one of the second highest or in the other top 5 peaks is called Eagle's Nest. And that's right around along on that same ridge as well.
Sounds like a good hike. Any other contributions to fun facts? Okay, so we move on to subcommittee status reports. So just want to see where we stand one at a time. So Brad, can we start with you, please?
I've been out of the country for the last 3 weeks, so I have not done anything in terms of any job for the last 3 weeks other than read the packet right before we came last night. So sorry, no update.
Liz?
No update either, but I'd like to know, like, did you spread the news of Ashland County to a different country? And are they willing to come over here for a visit?
I talked about Ashland, yeah, and that there was bears and wolves up here. So people were surprised there's wildlife around over there, but I don't think anybody's going to come. So sorry.
Lisa?
Well, let's see. George and I met to talk about how to deal with subcommittees. I've got a plan, but I haven't written it down for how to deal with the kind of like the SWOT analysis, the issues, the trends, the challenges, and opportunities. That'll be my job.
Okay, Pat?
I've got the ag and forestry and natural resources, and since we have Mary Jo here, yesterday I was at the farm, and on the south fence line, that half mile, I had it surveyed April 30th and set posts for the survey line, and then I was pulling the old steel posts with a shovel, dig around them, and so I can get them loose and whatever. But as I'm doing that, I hear something walking through the woods, not fast. So I pause and I look, and there's a little knoll where I was at. And so I look, and 50 feet, maybe 60 at the most, up pops a big bear head. And I can see his eyes going back and forth looking. And then I can see him smelling. I had some salmon loaf for lunch, and my cooler wasn't far away. But this year, Mary Jo, instead of standing up and scaring the bear, which I felt bad about for a very long time last year, this is very close, like 100, 150 feet from last year. This time, the bear, when he was trying to figure out where the scent was coming from, I just simply said this loud, "Here, bear, bear." And that was enough for him to see me and then walk away. And I didn't scare him this time. So I feel good about not scaring the bear. I scared him last year. He was right behind me. That was not good to scare. On the ag part, Lissa started back in December with some ag-related meetings, so she spearheaded that with the group. So I attended those, and now we're on a farmland preservation set of meetings. We've got one the 24th coming up. Mary Jo has been spearheading that with Northwest Regional Planning, so that part we're doing good on. The forestry plan, I know we approved that as a board several years ago, and for the life of me on the county website, I cannot find it. So once we get done with the farmland preservation, I'm going to have to track down the county plan and see if we can get it on the forestry website and then start in on that. And I have been planting more trees again, and I did 10 acres of acorns and shagbark hickory and black walnut last year trying to reforest. Did the online course on forest adaptation last winter. So I got a lot of questions about forest adaptation and what's going on with, climate change, which is what it is. It's really different. So I'll get to the forestry part once we wrap up the farmland preservation.
Okay, George, I have transportation and utilities. So it is my intention to try to draw on people from different transportation and utility sectors and maybe do it in two separate segments because they're kind of different categories. So I'm going to try to ask the Harbor Commission to see if there's someone who would participate in a working group, the County Highway Department, from the Airport Commission, from the trails, hiking trails and ATV trails. So that's my approach, is to start inviting people who might be willing to give some time to the subject and then open, and so form a working group. I'm not sure about, how we provide space and a meeting time or place to do this. And I think that's something we have to figure out for all of us because, okay, I'm going to have some kind of working subgroup maybe with people contributing, but how do we actually make that happen? Where can we meet? When can we meet? How do we meet? Do we need to be online? Do we not? There's a lot of those kind of practical questions, but I'm going to start by just seeing if I can attract some people from the different areas. And then if I can do that, then establish a meeting time and place and make it known to the public that they're willing to come and contribute, or maybe invite some people to come and contribute from the different governmental groups, different municipalities, someone from La Pointe, someone from Butternut, they're really different needs. So that's my approach, but I think each of us has to take our own individual approach to our, to what we are personally, willing and able and prepared to do in terms of trying to get these elements written. So we're missing Charlie today for the intergovernmental. Gary, are you there?
I'm here.
Can you tell us anything going on with the economic development and land use elements?
Yeah, a few weeks ago, I talked to our land description office and told them that we'd be looking for more information at some point. I'm still waiting to hear when we get to the point of bringing Northwest Regional Planning on so that we have more of a guideline as to, okay, how in depth or how far are we going? So that because they've done this before, and so that we don't, both them and us are on the same page as, what do they see us needing before we get too far ahead of ourselves. But I do have just a quick point of something that this could have gone before, but about a week ago, I was on a little lake west of Mellon, and you could hear the traffic on GG, which is a well-traveled road. But at one point, I said to my fishing buddy, that is the loudest truck I have ever heard. Well, about 4 seconds later, we discovered it was not a truck. It was an Air Force Reserve fighter jet at treetop level who covered the entire lake wood line heading towards Mellon. And my fishing partner actually covered his ears. That sound was so loud. I know they've done this in the past, but maybe we should let our county residents know there's no war going on yet. But when the fighter jets are training, they like the Pinocchio Range and that area between Mellon and Clam Lake. I've seen them on other areas over there in the past. But I'm sure that would shock some people because he was at the treetop level when he came over. So maybe we could use that as economic development and tell people, hey, the Air Force is using our area as a training ground. Come and see it.
I'm not taking that into transportation. Thank you.
Right.
So hopefully, I don't know if everybody's gone through and reviewed the 2016 comprehensive plan, but hopefully we've all read through the sections related to our elements. I was impressed. I think it's a pretty well done, frankly. So really happy with that. Any other comments or thoughts on the subcommittee work? Okay, then if not, we'll move on to the next item. which is discussion of communication vehicles. Oh, I'm sorry, Pat.
Just as a, I don't know, observation or question that permeates a few things is if you want to go back to that previous screen you were on, we've got this divvied up in an order that each of us have an interest in the topic, presumably that we're doing. And yet, like for what I have, ag, forestry, and natural resources, in the elements that we have to meet for the comp plan, there's the cultural piece that split. Liz has that. And so as we go through this stuff, it's one thing to say, here's the elements that are required, but then as we go through this planning process, I have part of one of these categories, and then Liz has another part of it. So just so that we figure out how we're going to divvy that up, or how the meetings are coordinated or data gathered or separated and all of that, just kind of a procedural thing as we encounter it.
Other thoughts on that subject? So the reason I proposed and convinced you to maybe go along with me on this organization was for our data collection purposes. Because the cultural elements that go with cultural facilities is kind of a natural for who you're going to talk to and where you're going to get information. And the natural resources elements that relate to that are really kind of related to forestry and agriculture. So my suggestion, and what I'll do for like transportation and utilities, I'm probably going to segregate it into two sections of my analysis. And that's what I would suggest for cultural resources and community facilities. I would divide my analysis into two sections. So you've got the cultural resources section and the community facilities section. You're talking to the same people pretty much. And so that's easily just when we have to map it into the actual final comprehensive plan, you can take the cultural resources, and if Pat has segregated agricultural, forestry, and natural resources into segments of his work, you can combine natural resources and cultural resources and map it into the formatting that's prescribed by the statute. But the reason I proposed doing it this way was for our collection of information and working with people, because there's a big difference between forestry and cultural resources, or between community facilities and utilities. So that's my approach to it, Pat. Yeah.
Could you go to page 5 of that file? It's page 5 on the PDF. So I think we're scrolling. Yeah, if you want to scroll down.
I may have not.
Or let's see, I'm on the consolidated draft file. Okay, you'd have to go down. Well, yeah, but if yeah, but that's trying to clarify what I was trying to point. So right there, just because they're together. So we've got focus groups, and we've got list 1 through 7 of how we've divvied it up. And then below that, it says these focus groups will, and then you've got this other order. And it just as we proceed through all of this stuff, are we having focus groups for both of those things, 1 through 7, the first set, and 1 through 7, the second set? Or are we doing something different?
No, our focus groups are only the first set. And then if focus group number 4 is segmented between agriculture, forestry, and natural resources, and focus group number 5 is segmented between cultural resources and community facilities, then you can just take the natural resources segment from 4 and the cultural resources segment from 5 and slide it down into the agricultural, natural, and cultural resources element that's going to be in the published plan.
So as we go through meetings and stuff, we're organizing those based on the first set of 1 through 7s as opposed to the second. So as far as, am I going to go to this meeting or that one? Is it part of my category? Not. But something, and Liz, I want to ask you this question. in the second set of 1 through 7, it's got ag, natural, and cultural resources. And I can't help but think about Bad River and how natural and cultural resources tie together for them in a particularly important and strong ways and more history than they do lots of others. I have some concern that unless we're careful, we're going to lose that connection of the natural and cultural resources, that interplay, that interrelationship, interconnection that's so important to Bad River if we're not being careful. But if these are the state guidelines, they may not have been thinking about that. But for us, I think it's really important that we pay close attention to that. And it would be easy for us to miss if we're not careful.
Liz?
Well, I thought that it would be a good idea just for, to attach a memo to them. And, you know, at their Bad River tribal meetings, they could put a planning committee aspect and attach natural resources and cultural resources as part of it.
Other comments? Discussion?
I
Lisa?
still don't think I'm fully understanding how a county plan engages and interacts with a sovereign nation. Because it seems like a lot of the cultural sites might be on the reservation. And so we're not really doing a visionary plan for the reservation. I mean, I just want to get my mind around how those two integrate. Like Bad River's its own nation, so that has its own plans. If the cultural sites are on the res, then the Ashland County is not necessarily responsible for tribal cultural, but it might be other things. Is that, I don't know, it's always been a question for me because it came up with the Natural Resources Committee. You know, we were talking a lot about how to protect the res and what the reservation's doing, and it's not really the county's jurisdiction under this plan. So maybe regional planning can help with that.
If I can have permission to speak, I can answer these questions.
Speaking, please. Mary Jo?
Mary Jo.
Go ahead.
So the agriculture, cultural, and natural resources section is all one section of the comprehensive plan. And I'm working on this with the town of Marengo right now. Like that section alone is 42 pages. So individually, you're focusing county-wide on what are the natural resources of the county. Like what are the water resources? What are the threatened and endangered species? What are land preservation areas, environmental corridors? And then for the natural resource section, you similarly identify things. And then for the cultural resources, you identify culturally what's significant across the county. So architecture, historic buildings, archaeological sites, and the Bad River Band of Chippewa would fall into that as a cultural site. So you're identifying these places and you would provide information about them, but you're not necessarily developing goals or activities associated with those individual areas. And then furthermore, for the agriculture, cultural, and natural resource section of the plan, we're going to identify goals and activities for each of those that are important. So natural resources, what are our goals for natural resources county-wide? And we would look at the current plan and we would answer from the current plan from 2016, what were those goals and activities and have they been accomplished? And are they still relevant? And then we would develop any new activities that we see fit for the next plan period. Same thing with cultural resources. Like for the town of Marengo, which we're going through right now, the main goal is to promote and preserve the town's cultural resource base. So then there's a couple activities associated with that. But for the county plan, we would be asking ourselves culturally what's important across the whole county, whether it's archaeological sites, historic sites, and then how do we want to promote the preservation or restoration or protection of those things. So hopefully that answered some of the question. And
Thank
if
you.
anyone has any questions, I can try to answer.
Alyssa?
So we know that Bad River's quote property is part of Ashland County. And I just want to verify, like with the tribe or natural or regional planning, how to deal with that as a sovereign nation. Because if we're saying that the county will write goals and objectives and actions for natural resources that are within a reservation, which is a federally designated boundary for a sovereign nation, then they need to be a lot more deeply involved in this whole process. But I don't think we have any goals or actions in the plan right now. I think there's only one in the current plan that says something specifically about Bad River. Because we have no jurisdiction over them. We could write an action in here, a natural resource, oh, you should do this with the sloughs or whatever we want it. But it's like saying to Canada. So I'm just, as we keep going forward, just how do we acknowledge the difference between the two governmental entities?
Liz?
That's why I think that the tribe should be involved in this. And, we're not telling them, what to do. They're going to give us guidance in what we should do. And just like Mary Jo said about archaeology or architecture or any natural resources, they will, guide us through what they know about our natural resources, endangered species, how to protect those environmental things too.
Yeah, in our plan, I mean, we're not making goals and activities for the reservation, but we could recognize, like, we understand that the Kakagan and Bad River sloughs are international significant wetland, and we promote supporting high water quality there. Like, it could be things where you recognize the significance and we're in support of the protection of that. But we would not actually be developing activities to implement on the tribal lands.
Erica?
Mary Jo said perfectly what I was going to say.
Alyssa?
So that is not, we should keep our language so that we understand there's two parts of the plan. One is a background section, which is descriptive and talking about the assets in the county, which you could say Bad River Sloughs, blah, blah, blah. Part two, where all of this work that we're doing, I think, is in all of these work groups are set up for part two, which is goals, objectives, and actions. So we should be like intentional about when we're talking about the tribe, how we're engaging them and what part of the plan. Because they really don't have, and we work with Bad River all the time. I mean, as well, Mary Jo was on the natural resources and the ag work group, and we had Bad River people there, but we were being really clear that the goals and objectives of part two were not engaged with Bad River unless we said work with Bad River as a partner. But that all of this work that we're talking about to describe natural resources or archaeological sites, that's all in part one. It's just descriptive. And then still we should be working, as I'm sure regional planning will understand, really deeply with like their TIPO office for the cultural resources. And a lot of that information is not shared with the public, but at least they would say a list. Here's our historically relevant sites like the cemetery or the powwow grounds or something. So I'm just trying to figure out our language so that we're working as good neighbors with the tribe, but not like setting expectations or stepping into things that aren't our jurisdiction.
Any other comments or discussion? Pat?
Part of Bad River is owned by folks that aren't members of Bad River, which is a whole nother layer of making it interesting. But the comp plan doesn't give us authority to do everything that we might like to do within all of the boundaries of Ashland County. The city of Ashland, for example, controls their zoning. We don't. you know, the city of Mellon is going to make decisions on what they choose to do. People with wooded and farmland are going to make decisions that they choose, given that they have the property right. So on every square inch of Ashland County, somebody else has some authority to make some decisions, and ours is limited. So as we go through this, we always have to bear in mind, you know, what do we have authority to do as a county and what don't we? And it varies where we're at in the county, and certainly varies with Bad River, but it varies with the city of Ashland and everywhere else too. And so that's why, you know, it's a plan and we work towards, but it's always going to take cooperation and decisions by others to change anything that the majority or the owners perceive to be a positive change. So when I read the comp plan for the township I own land in, it's, you know, I can tell who some of the people were that wrote it or involved in it, and I really like it. But then I look around and, you know, we all own our own land and people clearly make different decisions on what they do or don't do. And that reminds me that plans can be very good, but it still takes the individual property owners to decide that they want to engage in what's in the plan. And
Other comments? I would add that I think there's one section where vision, goals, and objectives will actually be really important, and that'll be into intergovernmental relations. So our vision of how we're working, for instance, with Bad River or the city of Mellon or the National Forest Service is part of what we have to think about what our vision is. We can't set the goals and objectives for the National Forest Service, but we can think about how we want to work together with them. Any other comments on the subcommittee status reports, item 5B? If not, we move on to item 5C, which is discussion of communications vehicles, shared drive for planning documents, websites, email, social media, electronic surveys. I think we're not fully clear on our communication strategies, and I'm deeply concerned that we not get our communications tangled in a mess. So thoughts, comments, insights, wisdom, anybody? Pat?
I guess one big picture thought is that this committee is a standing committee and not an ad hoc committee. Most counties would have an ad hoc committee, which means you do your work, you finished, you're done. We chose to make it a standing committee as a board so that things related to climate change in particular, we had more flexibility to look at things over a 10-year period and decide we want to make some changes, because the world really seems to change faster than it used to. So it gives us more flexibility. So in terms of the communications, it would be just that as things are put online, you know, for example, a website where people could add comments, that we state those things in a way that indicates this is ongoing, collecting feedback, information, suggestions, whatever, versus here's a deadline and after that, you know, we're done, because it's a standing, not an ad hoc. It's just that we bear that in mind as we consider language, as we collect stuff.
Other comments or discussion? Erica, do you have a sense of where we stand on things like a website for, or a central location for information? What's your view on that? And then I'll come to Lisa next, I think, on the same question.
I have not checked out the website, which I think was created, right, by Rachel. Did Rachel set up a website and then add the email to it? But the website really only has the previous comp plan, the plan from 2016 on it. So that's the sort of public facing repository of information, I think, that we have planned going forward, although I don't think it's fully fleshed out yet. The other, so it's not a website, but it's on SharePoint that I think we should perhaps talk about and maybe use a little more, because I think that it's perhaps only Dan and myself that are adding documents to it right now. Is that on SharePoint under AC County Administration and then Documents, Dan and I have been uploading the municipality comp plans, population projections through 2050, any other public input that we've received, all of the county department feedback and documents that I've received from the 2-question survey that we distributed. So that place is, I think, the one clearinghouse for us that will continue to be very useful if we can. I will do my best. I think it's pretty well organized right now, like within folders and subfolders, so that people can have a flow of where things go. I am not aware if anybody else has editorial capabilities on that, if you can upload things, because I think Dan had to ask Rachel to add me to have it on there. But George, were you able to access those things?
Okay, so regarding SharePoint, so Erica sent me a link
Yeah.
this last week, and I tried to use that link and I totally failed. And I had to reset my password, and then my password wouldn't reset. And then I couldn't get my email for a couple of days. And then finally Rachel helped me get it all straightened out, but it took her a long time to figure out. So because many of us aren't very familiar with these tablet computers and with the particular software, I think we need to, if we're going to use a resource, we're going to have to train ourselves about how to use it.
Right.
So Brad, did you have an experience?
Yeah, well, February 5th, Rachel sent the SharePoint. And I tried then, and I just tried again, and I had the
Can't
same
use
issue. It says it's my password is not valid, and yet that's my password. So I don't want to reset because I need to get into my email. But
Right.
so there must be some other password that was that isn't tied to anything I'm using here. But it should be, the thing is it's Microsoft Office, so it should be the same thing as the Outlook, and I can log into Outlook, but I can't log into the SharePoint. So I don't know if it's a security setting on not being on the same network, but I'm on the same network. It
No,
should work, but
I'm guessing it's a permissions thing, and I'm in here now, and it's not offering me the capability of giving permissions to
Right.
anyone else. So I think that it's probably Rachel that controls those permissions. I can definitely talk to her and make sure all committee members are added and have editorial access to it.
Alyssa?
Is that for the committee access, or is there a public facing website?
There were 2 things we've talked about. So the first was the public facing website
Yeah.
that Rachel set up. This SharePoint is only for committee access.
oh, and there I did get it.
You did get in.
Just got me in.
Weird.
I just, but it must be a network thing that when I'm at home,
You can't get
I
on.
wasn't able to.
Interesting. Okay.
So the public facing part is on the county website.
Yes.
Under planning committee, easy to access. That seems to work just fine. And we'll have to decide what we want to put on there. I'm wondering if we want to put our meeting minutes when they are approved on. Meeting minutes are accessible through the calendar, but it might be useful to folks to be able to go to that one place and see the series of proceedings through the meetings. Could we do that? Carisha?
I could definitely look into that.
Okay, Carisha will look into that. Thank you very much. Other discussion on our communications, surveys, media, et cetera. Alyssa, do you have observations?
Well, I wasn't sure what the difference was between C and D. Because it seemed like C, those were all tools that you would use in a public participation plan. My main thought on both C and D is I have no understanding yet of who does what. The most recent thing I have is I think regional planning might have used Burnett County's template for public participation, and then they crossed out different things that weren't relevant to Ashe County. But it doesn't say anything about who does what or anything. So before I would ever like approve a participation plan would be like, what are the exact tools, some sort of timeline, and who's doing what? You know, Extension does a lot of outreach already on this, so we're happy to help. But I'm not sure if, like regional planning, are they the outer voice for the group? Do you know what I mean? Are they the voice? So they're doing a survey and they're doing a newsletter and they're keeping your website. I don't know. It feels like there needs to be a lot more details.
I 100% agree, especially if you're getting comments from the public or questions. There has to be a clearinghouse for someone to be able to respond or to gather and keep that information together.
But that was what the email is for, right? That Rachel did set up and is on the website.
Right, but originally that request for that email came from me because we have 6 different educators and we're trying to just like, if there's public comments, people are like, I don't know who to talk to at UW. So go to Outreach Extension and you can put it in there. It'll come to me and my director and then we'll farm the question out. That turned into could we use that also for the comp plan? However, Rachel then nixed the whole idea on it for Extension, and she asked Extension to get their own email. So then that email address went back to Dan. And the last I heard was Dan and I think George and maybe you, Erica, get that to you. It gets forwarded to you. And I'm out of the picture, Extension's out of that picture. We're going to get our own general outreach email. So I'm not seeing anything yet. Rachel just said, yeah, we'll use it for the county employees because it's an Ashland County email address. Is that making sense? Started out UW, now it's all county.
So there is an email address that's about the plan that George and I and Dan have access to. I don't know if Eric
I
does.
don't.
But so there is an email, and that's what's on the website so that people can submit comments about the plan to that email address.
With the word extensions not in it.
The word extension is not in it.
Okay.
The email address is, I gotta find it here.
So then who actually consolidates those comments and where do they go?
So on the, there was a bunch of emails. Did I end up deleting it for when I got back? But the email was supposed to say, or anybody that was directed to the email, it's supposed to say, if you want specific response, please acknowledge that you want a response in the email. Otherwise, it's just comments and they're going to collate, and George and I will have access to those and can be able to divvy them up wherever they need to go based off those subcommittees. I'm looking for where that be.
Okay, allow me to say that at this point, discussion item C is simply about tools. We're only talking about tools that we would want to be able to deploy in service of our engagement with the public. We haven't invited engagement with the public other than to attend these meetings, which was made in the public announcement. And when we know how a website would work or how surveys would actually work, then we can issue invitations for public participation, and we will have to have decided how we will manage their input in those instances.
So to make it even more confusing for you, Lisa, the email is ashlandwisconsin.gov.
I'm glad it's coming up again because it is a tangled web and we wanted something different. And then we thought, oh, we'll use the same one, but it needs to be like.
Probably should have it like comprehensive planning at Ashland County.
Exactly. That's what I want.
It might need to be something changed on that email address It hasn't, nobody's been used. It's out. Was it in the, George, was that email address in
It's not,
the
anywhere-
public notice that went out?
it's not anywhere right now. So I'll take the action item to ask Rachel to adjust the name on the email.
Yeah.
Okay,
Love it.
Liz.
Thank you.
On our county website, can the folks of the community go on there and see an update or anything that we're doing with the comprehensive plan?
Not yet. Well, so the first step toward that would be to post our minutes of our meetings to that website. Right now, the only things there is a copy of the 2016 comprehensive plan, which is a great foundation if people want to understand what we're talking about.
Also, people are so addicted to social media. Is there any way that we could have a site that they could use to have information but not to comment? Because the comments would be crazy. There would be too many and nobody would be able to answer them, but like a informational Facebook site.
Thoughts on that?
I use Facebook for work extensively. Not enough coffee today. And so the way I set my page up, I can share and people can take stuff and share it. But I agree with you. The question about a Facebook page is who runs it, like who posts? And then I know it's supposed to be an interactive page because the whole thing is built on public input, to drive the future of the county. And people are weird. They say the strangest things. I don't know if you could cut off comments, that would be almost anti-Facebook, but somebody needs to be the carrier, the keeper of that, and then either cut people off if they're getting mad or, give factual information. You need a keeper.
Yes.
For sure. Yeah.
I don't think the county has a site. I know like we have land conservation has a site, and I think there is a couple other departments that might have a site, but I don't think there's actually a county site. Does
No,
anyone?
There isn't.
There's not.
There isn't.
What are
Okay.
you referring to, Mary Jo? What do you mean by site?
A social media site, Facebook or any other social media.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I would just say that I think we avoid it. Even with comments off, it's like I don't know. I don't use any social media, so I don't know. Maybe I'm a bad example, but I think it's just it's just creates headaches, and we set it up and then it's not updated, and then I think a web page is better, and we direct them to a web page that we can say, hey, Rachel, can you update? Or it at least has something on there. It's recent. I think that's my feeling is I don't think social media is, maybe I'm wrong. Might be the youngest person in here and I'm not on social media. So maybe I'm wrong, but
I agree. The website would be great.
I mean,
Lisa?
I
You have your mic on for a reason?
Just memory problems.
Oh, okay.
I think if
My
we-
observation would be, let me make this one comment that I think social media could be very useful in inviting people to make a comment in a different, like on the county website, or to submit something to a central location so that we're not scattered. But so for issuing an invitation, useful PR, but for collecting information, probably too complicated.
Yeah.
Erica.
I would just say that, yeah, if we're issuing invitations to come and speak or to like post, the basics of an agenda or what might it be, I think it probably should go on the Ashland County Extension site because there's no other, like we can't start a social media campaign from scratch without sufficient leverage behind it to actually get people to add it to their feed. But Extension Ashland County already has a few thousand. It's not a lot, but it's enough. And then it's shareable, and then people can come. But yeah, I don't think we invite feedback about things on Facebook because it's not an official county space. Instead, we invite feedback at the meetings where it's captured.
Makes sense to me. Alyssa, would that be viable?
I promote a lot of Ashland County groups and businesses and farmers by just merely saying, UW Extension works in Ashland County. Here's a great event to increase a farm visit, farm tour, or the Clean Sweeps. It was the third list. We did a survey at the Clean Sweeps. It was the third listed thing, most popular thing that people got information about Clean Sweeps. Over 300 people came on Saturday. And that was number 3 after Daily Press and local newspapers. So people do read it. That being said, if you wrote a press release and sent it to me, I would just post it and say, here's news about Ashland County comp plan, please share and blah, blah, blah. So if that, Ashland, anybody could do that. League of Women Voters loves to share a lot of stuff, and yeah, that could be done. But I didn't want to be the official Ashland County Facebook face. But sharing stuff, yeah.
Pat?
So like Brad, I'm not on social media, and so far I have refused to be on that. I don't think that's going to change. But it's not lost on me when we look at C there, that those are electronic formats, and we know from our broadband study a few years ago, and hopefully we get Novato to expand here. We have a lot of people without access to broadband, and so if we're not careful, we're going to end up with a biased sample on who we contact. So yes, we can contact people, through extension and get some, but unless we do enough things to get a representative sample of people in the county, we could end up with a bias. So we could add, maybe we print something and send it out with the tax bill, for example. We're mailing anyway. The city of Ashland has, over the years, added more things when they mail out the tax bill than they used to. And that might be just a paragraph in there, a fourth of a sheet or whatever, to add that when the tax bill goes out, and the timing would actually be pretty good as far as, when people get that. And then we know we're covering a large number of people. But it'd have to get out to every, buddy with those tax bills.
Other comments on this agenda item? If not, we'll move on to the next one, which is 5D, review and approval of participation plan. And I made a note on my copy here. And my note is that we can vote to approve this plan as it has been adjusted. And those of us who vote in favor of it then have a right of moving for reconsideration. So then it can be moved for reconsideration at our next meeting. And so we won't be locked in completely if we approve this plan today, but we'll at least have a guideline to go forward. My view of the participation plan is, one, it's required by the statute. 2, that this meets all the statutory requirements. We don't need to know exactly who is doing which piece of this or which tools we're using more or less. That's not required. So we can meet the requirement of having an actual participation plan in place. If we would like to approve this today, we might not. I did most of the work on there's a lot of superfluous background information in the Burnett County plan. We don't need to know the history of why the law requires us to do this. We just have to say what we plan to do. And so that's the markup. And I invite discussion and comment and see if we want to do anything with this, Bet.
So if we approve this today, would the next version that we look at have all of this crossed out language out, and then what would amount to a clean copy? Or would you bring back the same document or both?
There is a clean copy, and the consolidated draft is the clean copy already.
But would you only be bringing back the clean copy, or would you be bringing?
You can bring back both copies when you're doing reconsideration. The two copies have exactly the same wording. One's just not showing the deletions, and one is showing the deletions. I mean, those two versions are exactly the same.
Yeah, as I kept reading, I thought, oh, it was redundant. I'll just say that. Anyway, I just want clarity. If we bring it back for reconsideration, are you talking about the entire file, or are we proposing only the clean copy?
Oh, so if we vote to approve this, we're voting to approve the clean copy. Because if you voted to approve the marked up copy, you would be approving all those deletions that are in the marked up copy. So it amounts to exactly the same thing,
Yeah, I see what he's saying.
exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I didn't realize until I had waded through everything.
Sorry.
And just for anybody else, in case a meeting from now, they decide to read things and then realizing,
Other,
Do are you, do we have to have a plan that meets the minimum requirements of law, like in place right now for any reason? Is there
we should.
a rush?
Should this, Erica, you maybe have a little bit better understanding than I do about that?
The timeline that Northwest Regional sent us said that we should have a plan in place this month.
A public participation plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, if with that, if there's a caveat that says this is an organic document, that we will be finding new ways, then you can change it and adopt it. This is the minimum that means you're qualified or whatever. But there's other things. I still am unsettled with the communication plan where it doesn't say when things are happening or who's doing it. But if this fits the law and the law doesn't say you better say when you're going to do it and who's doing it, then this would suffice. But knowing that this is an organic thing and we're going to keep adopting it. I mean, we're going to have a radio station on that is located in downtown Ashland by the end of this year. So I would want something at some point that says part of our actual plan that we're going to enact involves radio programming where members of the community or this committee come on and talk about what we're doing and why it's important and that kind of thing. If we can make this adaptable and organic and change it as we go, cool, then let's vote for this. Then we check off the box for the law. But this is not like a plan that's drivable yet. Does that make sense?
It says right in the plan and taken right out of the Burnett County plan, that there will be changes. That this
Okay.
is the baseline, but there will be changes as practical circumstances, funding, other, factors, come about. Yeah.
Does that answer your question then?
well, when I read this, I had no expectation that all the details of how everything would happen would get done. This is a plan and then the details get fleshed out. And obviously, you're right, there's a lot of fleshing out to do on the actual details that get carried out. But if you're looking for a motion to approve this, and we bring back at the next meeting just the clean electronic copy, so that both aren't in there, then it's just a clean copy. I would make that motion to approve the clean copy of the public participation plan.
That's your motion.
I think there already is a clean copy. Pat, do you know that?
Well, I just don't want to see in the packet all the pages with the crossed out stuff next time, so that when we put the packet in next time, we're only looking at the clean copy.
It's in the packet. It's
Yeah.
it's already there. If you click on just that one,
Right.
you don't see the other one.
Right, so
No, both versions are in the packet, and that's
Right.
Pat's saying it's confusing because both versions are in the packet and only wants the one.
for the next meeting, only the clean copy in the.
Do we need it in the packet at the next meeting, though?
Well, George, in case someone for reconsideration, if you vote in the majority, you can bring it back for reconsideration. he wants the opportunity for someone to bring it back for reconsideration if someone decides they want to make some changes at the next meeting. And when you bring it back for reconsideration, it has to be at the very next meeting after it was approved. Otherwise, that opportunity will lapse after the next meeting.
Right, and reconsideration can only be moved by someone who voted in favor of the plan to begin with
At the next meeting.
at the next meeting. A
In-
motion,
Oh.
there's a motion made to approve the Ashland County Comprehensive Plan for Public Participation Plan as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
There's a second. So now for discussion, Erica, you have a comment?
There are a few highlighted areas in the clean copy around a couple of different things, like around the issue of the email address, whether we insert postal addresses, these sorts of things. So I think if and when we bring it back, perhaps we say, adopted on this date, edited and updated on whatever all the later dates that we do that.
That sounds fine to me. Yeah, I mean, that email address and postal address are not a legal requirement, but they should be in our final version. So I think that would come back under reconsideration.
So the one hesitance that I have on this plan is that there's, I think, 7 stages. And there's basically a public meeting in each of those stages. And we're now, I guess, 18 months from needing to adopt it. Are we going to be able to have at least 7 different public meetings that address these in this next 18 months?
Well, it's pretty easy to have a public meeting. This is officially open to the public right now.
Well, I thought there's something that there was a time frame on the amount of time for noticing it. And maybe that was just the hearing and not the meeting. But
Public hearing.
the public hearing has that, and there's only one public hearing, I think.
Right, there's a public hearing required after the plan has been written in its final form or in its preliminary final form, so the public can object or approve or suggest changes before it goes to the county board for final approval.
I don't know what for the public meetings, it just says, at a minimum, the requirements of state statute 19.31 pertaining to public meetings and notification will be met. I don't know what the minimum is, but that's like 7 and 30 days. If it's 30 days with the minimum public notice on that, 30 days, 7, we're really pushing getting 7 meetings in. If it's only 10 days notice, we can probably get it. But I mean, if you're talking 7 of the months to get, I mean, yeah, I guess we could do 7 months in a row, but we're not in those stages then.
So
I don't know what state statute 19.31
Mary Jo?
requires.
for Marengo, our comprehensive plan, we meet monthly. And the Northwest Regional Planning Commission, when they get started on this, they'll start scheduling those meetings and helping to get those organized. And then once you come up with a draft plan, then that gets posted for public review. And the public has 30 days to review it before the final hearing. And that's where they would offer comments or support and that sort of thing. But that class 1 public notice is at the end when you actually have something to review, and that has to be notified 30 days before the public hearing. But that's only a one-time event.
But Brad, were you talking about public meetings?
Public meetings,
Which-
that each
right.
stage has a public meeting, and the public hearing is in stage 7.
Yeah.
But like stage 6, it says open house and public meeting. That's 2 events that have to be publicly noticed. And I don't know what 19.31, what the minimum, I just don't want to put us in a bind with that. We're got to go ahead and notice the first meeting when we're not ready for that first meeting yet.
Well, are we required to have 7 meetings? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying is, do we want each stage to have a public meeting as something that's in here? That's what, like, it seems like maybe a lot, but but maybe like Mary Jo said, monthly meetings, we just schedule them and then go, and we just hit the 7 months leading into 30 days.
Yeah.
of December.
Basically, what will happen is you'll have a meeting related to each topic. Like there'll be a meeting for agriculture, cultural, and natural resources. And at the meeting, then Northwest Regional Planning Commission would review the background elements, the maps, the items that were in the previous plan. And then for that second piece that Lissa referenced early on, that's the policy part. And that's where you would mention the goals related to agriculture, cultural resources, and natural resources in the previous plan were this. And here were the activities or the objectives. Are these still relevant? What things should we cross off? And then that's where that is the public meeting. So people could attend that and weigh in.
Then doing that, we just went from 7 to 27 or 28. Maybe even more, because each stage of this plan has stage 2 is data collection and analysis. Okay, that's easy, but that means 7 meetings because we have 7 sections. And then issue identification, that's another 7 meetings. And then develop goals and objective, another 7 meetings. And then strategy development, another 7 meetings. And then if we do it by each one, I think we want to group them all and have meetings. Because that's a lot of meetings to have if we're going to hold monthly meetings and go through these stages that are listed. That's my concern, is the way this is listed. It's a lot of meetings depending on how we're going to do it.
I think it will
Erica?
help you get to the guidance part from the Regional Planning Commission.
Yeah.
I agree.
We
Yeah,
have
Erica.
the scope of work from Northwest Regional Planning. The timeline listed within the last 3 pages of the scope of work lists 7 meetings, and they're calling it steering committee meetings, but it's about each of those 7 sections. And I believe this is what they mean by open meetings, right? So this meeting is an open meeting. And so each of these 7 things will be talked about in this meeting, open to the public. And then the last one is actually steering committee meeting 8. Consider public comment, draft plan finalization, approve resolution. So all of those come together, but they also, in public meeting 7, say month 12, 13, should sort of be our public open house and discussion around all of it.
And that would be your public hearing, most likely.
Right.
Yes, so she's exactly correct. And that's sort of what I was trying to describe.
Other comments or discussion on the motion that is on the floor? I will add my thought on this section that Brad is referring to at the end of this plan document, which is public participation planning stage and adoption process. I take this as a guideline that some of these things are going to happen concurrently.
Yeah.
This is kind of an outline, kind of a checklist, rather than a prescriptive of a lockstep pattern to follow. And that's my interpretation of this. Other comments, Lissa?
That was exactly my question. Is this part of the minimum required by the state law, this whole section? Because I also thought it was a checklist. Like if you look at the pre-planning, I mean, we've already met multiple times on all of that. So is this just like, here's your to-do list, make sure you're checking off this stuff? Or is this part of the minimum required by the end of June that Erica mentioned earlier? We want to have a public participation plan by the end of June. Is that part of the state requirements?
Okay, here's the state requirement. The governing body of a local governmental unit shall adopt written procedures that are designed to foster public participation, including open discussion, communication programs, information services, and public meetings for which advance notice has been provided in every stage of the preparation of a comprehensive plan. The written procedures shall provide for wide distribution of proposed, alternative, and amended elements of a comprehensive plan and shall provide an opportunity for written comments on the plan to be submitted by members of the public to the governing body and for the governing body to respond to such comments. That's the requirement. There's a lot of flexibility in how you go about meeting the requirement.
So everything after that paragraph that you read on page 2 of our notes, everything after that is like Cadillac stuff. You could,
Those are the guidance basically that originally came from Northwest Regional Planning for Burnett as to how to meet those requirements. So it flushes out a whole lot more than the really, you could do this on a really bare bones basis if you had to.
so what I'm trying to ascertain then is the idea that there's quote 7 meetings or a certain number of meetings. That is all like Burnett County and us, what we think, and regional planning and their experience, but there's nothing that says you have to have this many meetings in these stages. All of that is like supportive documentation for being effective, but it's not like required.
So once we have the expertise of Northwest Regional Planning on board, which we don't actually have yet, but I would say it is my interpretation that you can meet this requirement in a lot of different ways. And this is the guidance basically that Northwest Regional Planning has in their playbook for how a county can go about meeting the requirement. The other requirement are the legal notice requirements, which stand for all of our public type of meetings and hearings of their different categories. And it does stipulate that for that final comprehensive review, that we meet that 30-day requirement. Yeah, but I think it's just for that final one. Other discussion?
Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying it seems like in that public participation plan by planning stage and adoption, it seems like we're separating things that are going to get grouped, and I just don't like that. Simplicity, straight to the point, is what it should be. We don't need 7 stages if we're not going to go through each stage sequentially, in my mind. That's what I like. 7 stages is great if you're going to go through them sequentially. But if we're just going to go through them all kind of at once, then why have 7 stages? Why not just say, here's what we're going to do? Be direct. That I hate this. Oh, we're going to do it all flowery, but we're not. We're going to do it. And so I don't think we need the 7 stages if we're not going to go through the 7 stages.
So each section, Brad, or each stage?
Nope. Mary Jo, I don't think you have the actual document. It's what's on the screen there. If you scroll down, there are stages of the public participation. It has nothing to do with the different sections. It's how we're going to get the information to write the plan. And part of it is, writing the plan. So there's stages there.
Yeah.
Like I agree. The data collection analysis stage, that's what Northwest Regional Planning is doing for us. That can stay there. But if we're going to do issue identification and develop goals and objective in one meeting, then why have 2 stages?
Because you only do it for one topic, like agriculture, cultural, and natural resources. It takes about 90 minutes to present the background information and go through the goals and activities.
And then we don't need 2 different stages to say issue identification and develop goals and objectives. That can be one stage. That's what I'm saying is we have 7 stages of strategy development. Is that part of these meetings? The meeting is going to be strategy development, develop goals and objectives, issue identification. Is that what the meeting is going to do, is all 3 stages? Then why do we have 3 separate stages for it? Because to me, if we're going to come together and say, today we're going to do strategy development, then we need to separate that out. But if we're going to do issues and opportunities, or goals and objective and strategy all in the same meeting, they don't need to be separate stages. It confuses things. And if I see this, I'm like, wait, why are we talking about existing and develop new strategies to meet the goals and objectives? We haven't even talked about the goals and objectives yet. Let us digest that. And so I think we want to merge these stages into something.
Erica?
It does seem like it would simplify things if we consolidated the language and made the scope of work from NWRPC coordinate with the
Yes.
public participation plan,
That-
right? So that we're using the same terms, and then we can refer to the months. If we don't have dates yet, we can refer to the month that this is going to happen in the timeline. Because I think that would pull together what Brad wants and then also keep us on track for what Northwest Regional Planning is considering.
Other comments and discussion? Pat?
I never interpreted that as you had to have a separate meeting for every stage. I interpret that as you could lump them together as it seemed to work.
I understand that interpretation, but it just, why not lump it together? If we're going to do it one way, why not just do it that way instead of saying, because if I'm a member of the public, I say, well, I care about making sure I'm part of the public participation for goals and objectives, but I don't care about how we're going to get to them.
Well, I think go back to the statute that George read from the state. There's this paragraph that gives you a broad outline. And then the state doesn't say, here's the gory details. They leave that
Right.
to you because everybody's going to have their own version. And I think the same thing is here. They just articulated the things they wanted you to get through, but then leave it to us to decide how much to lump. We might think we could lump 3 things together. Somebody else might think they could lump 2, depends on how things go. And we just do it.
That's why I just say is do it from the get-go. If we're planning on only having 7 meetings, that's going to cover those 3 of those stages each time, then let's only have 1 stage for those 3 stages.
And I think it's too early for us to decide
Let me
if we
bring this
want to
back
lump
the-
or not.
Let me bring this back to the chair. I want to ask Gary, if you're online, if you have an observation.
I had to unmute my speaker. My only concern, I'll sound like a broken record, is at the very beginning of this letter, it says reviewed by everybody. Has this been thoroughly reviewed by all of us and Northwest Regional Planning? Because the very first sentence in this, go back to page 1, says reviewed by everyone. It says right there, prepared and reviewed by Ashland County and Northwest Regional Planning. I think we're reviewing it now.
The very top about who put it in.
Well, this document from that tape was provided by Northwest Regional Planning, and they basically. This document was basically written by Northwest Regional Planning in its unmarked up form by Northwest Region for Burnett County. So I think when we're talking about this outline, which is basically just kind of a timeline, it's broken into like these stages, but it's basically just a sequencing of what happens in a certain order. But, I understand this is basically being the prescription given by Northwest Regional Planning. Now, they were invited to participate today, but I guess they were unable to do so. So my view is, my preference would be to go ahead to approve this as presented, subject to rescission at our next meeting. Hopefully, we'll have Northwest Regional Planning online between now and the next meeting, and we can bring it back for further discussion. But we'll have, because if we want to rewrite this, someone actually has to rewrite it. And if 7 of us rewrote it, we all end up with different rewrites, right? So I'm more comfortable just sticking with the way that it was originally presented, I think, by Northwest Regional Planning for Burnett. and we should just maybe consider it a guideline. Any other discussion? Lissa?
One thing, as we've been all talking about this, is I really, and I know they were invited for today, but I really feel like we need regional planning. I'm not sure when they come on as the paid partner, because I think they could answer a lot of these right off the bat. You know, like we were waiting before we got them because we were waiting for the grant announcement, but we know we got the 50,000. And then we know the county's going to put in 25, right, in the finance committee. So they got 75,000. I would love to know when they are coming in to just sort of say, here, you guys are the keepers, you're the experts. Not that we're going to turn the whole key over to them, but
Okay, a point of order. We're on discussion for the approval of this participation plan right now. The next agenda item will address the question of Northwest Regional Planning.
it just makes it harder to decide how to deal with this issue without knowing when we get access to their input.
Pat?
So if I remember right, we were supposed to approve this in the month of June, so we're in June. And I take it if it's approved and you vote in the affirmative, you'll choose to bring it back for reconsideration at the next meeting, which gives us time, which is you and perhaps some others, to talk to Northwest Regional Planning to clarify some of the things in yellow or other adjustments we might make, or just to better understand the things that we have latitude to modify later without any ill effects. And as we go through the planning process, so it seems like we need to approve this. And if it's brought back for reconsideration, we can tweak it. We'll have more information before the next meeting as you communicate with Northwest. And then we'll be done with it, you know, or at least a version that meets our requirements, but yet we can modify.
Further discussion, comments on this motion to approve this public participation plan as presented, subject to reconsideration at our next meeting? If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So the motion is carried. And we move on to our next agenda item. Thank goodness. Okay.
I can answer Lissa's question from previous if you'd like me to. I can answer Lissa's question
Okay. So
that was hanging.
we are now a discussion action item E5E, review of Northwest Regional Planning scope of work. Erica.
So we do not have a signed contract with, so just as the update on the grant, they cannot actually bill hours until we have, right, the signed contract. This whole CDBG Decker thing takes a lot longer than even I imagined. So there was the pre-agreement, which they required like 15 more documents from us. That was sent to them 2 weeks ago. They sent me back, but I've been gone for the past week. They did send me back right as I was leaving the draft of a final agreement. I spent today reviewing the final agreement. We have a couple of minor details going back and forth. We should be able to finalize that by tomorrow, get that back to them. But then it has to go to at least 3 other departments within Decker and their financial department to get fully approved. Then I believe we might have a semi-final contract that then we sign and then we send back, and then maybe we get a contract. So that's all to say, I believe that they are not logging hours, but they know that this is coming. And Northwest Regional Planning had planned for month 4. So we're in month 2 of what their original schedule is. So month 4 or August would be their steering committee meeting 1. And so that would be where they present plan update overview, issues and opportunities roundtable, and then the update narrative of demographics, housing, and transportation pieces of that. So that would be August, I believe.
To approve that final contract that comes on CDBG?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I think the board at our meeting, it would have been, I think, the end of March that we approved
It was already
this.
approved.
I think we're
And
done
then
with
we
what we need to do.
pre-approved the acceptance of the award as well. Yeah, yeah.
Other discussion on the scope of work? Oh, that's the next item. Okay. Is it? Yeah. E is, yeah, review Northwest Regional Planning scope of work. And then it goes together with F, which is working relationship and scheduling with Northwest Regional Planning, because I had been hoping that perhaps a representative would be on the call today, but they are not. I had a comment on scope of work. I think it's might be a subject worthy of some discussion. In the first paragraph,
Hey, do we have that online? Because I don't remember seeing it in the packet, and I thought it was in an email, but then I can't find that email. So
I don't. Okay. We just have the cover sheet. Do we have anything on that element? It's 5E and 5F.
yeah, it's not it's not in the
Okay.
packet. Yeah, if you just put it up on.
So I'll just read you the first paragraph in their scope of work here, which is a pretty reasonable document. I only have one thing that I think is worth discussion. So it says Ashland County adopted its current comprehensive plan, volume 1 background document, volume 2 vision and goals in 2016. As required by Wisconsin statute 66.1001, the plan must be updated every 10 years. This update will revise data, maps, forecasts, narrative, vision, and implementation strategies to reflect current conditions and long-term goals. Now, this is where I wanted to focus. That guide growth and development over the next 20 years. And I believe that word growth merits discussion along the way. So there's a lot of interest in this area. There's visible interest in what we call sustainability. And sustainability is a little bit more nuanced than the word growth. And economic growth has been kind of a business mantra for the past half century in the United States. But I think there are views that it's not always constructive growth. That was reflected in the reaction to the idea of changing Apostle National Lake Shores to a national park. I think that was just sort of a piece of evidence that people don't want to necessarily have a form of growth that's going to be perceived negatively or experienced negatively. So I just wanted to say that maybe what we ought to be thinking about is constructive development and sustainability and not just growth per se. And I don't know if anybody else has a comment on that. I just wanted to bring that up, and I think it'll be a discussion item along the way. Other thoughts on this agenda item? Pat?
I think you make some good points there that I agree with, and I won't belabor. The words development, carries a connotation, and certainly growth has implications, are often measured in terms of an economic sense. Planning for future changes, a word that's neutral in terms of economic value, that growth has, but even the word development, at our last farmland preservation meeting, we had talked about parcel sizes in the counties, and that was on our zoning committee meeting a week or two ago, and I've asked staff to send me the electronic copy so I can send that to the farmland preservation group. But just this word development, in my mind, what I see is, a 40 and something carving out in the woods and sticking something there. They call that development, but, it carries a negative connotation, when you see it done in certain ways. So, I would just, changes, future changes, and then stay away from those words that go back to the economic model of we're going to use our natural resources and try to make money.
I don't know if Gary is still online. I don't know if you're still there, Gary.
Yep, I'm here.
So since you have the economic development element, do you have thoughts on this question?
Well, one of the problems with is going to be economic development is just where's the business? And then the businesses are going to ask us, where's the people? And so it's going to be a tough issue because businesses need people and we don't seem to have them right now. I mean, in the southern half of the county, we've lost hundreds and hundreds of employees over the last 10 years. The mill in Park Falls closed. They had 700 people working there. The plant in Butternut closed. The little plant in Glidden closed. All of those jobs are gone, and there's nothing coming in except tourism, but that isn't helping us at the moment. So and of course in Ashland now we've got Northern College, as everybody's aware of. Those jobs are gone. I guess as a county, we have to figure out what comes first. If we attract businesses, where are the people coming from? And again, where do they live? And then, how do we market ourselves to a business of any sort and say, come to this area. It's a beautiful area to live. What I'm seeing where I live is a bunch of retirees like myself. And that has a big effect on the schools. There's no kids in our families anymore. I think we have to try and figure out, with some help, where is the economic development in the area? I mean, we talk about little businesses, but we've changed so much. We used to have dairy farms. Dairy farms meant big families in most cases. We don't have dairy farms anymore. As a majority in the county, we have beef farmers, but so the big question for us economically is, what is Ashland County's future? And how do we get there? I struggle. I live in town of Agenda, and I'll brag about it. We have the highest medium income, and I've said this before, of any other town in this county. The reason we have that is because we're all retired state teaching or federal employees. That isn't helping the county, other than we might buy something once in a while. But that's why the plan has to somehow address, how do we tout ourselves as a county for economic development, but then in the back of our head say we need housing and we need people. And I don't know which comes first, because if somebody big wants to come into the area and wants employees, where are they coming from? I know that doesn't really answer the whole question, but it's been my concern for a long time is, I can show you 20 houses in this area that are sitting empty because they were bought by people from out of town who use them as recreational property. That's not helping the county in the long run for people.
Thank you, Gary. Alyssa?
And I think you're really, I think you all are getting to the heart of what is this visionary planning for the future. And maybe these answers will tease out a little bit in conversations on that trends and issues. I work with 5 of the chapters with the work groups like Ag and Natural Resources that Pat was on, transportation. In there, we said, what are the trends? What's happening right now? And then we said, what are the issues of what's happening right now and in the future? And then that led to us coming up with actions and objectives, right? So you use the conversation and the data and people's desires when you're looking at issues and trends to move your plan forward. But you got to have a whole part of that conversation has to be that trends and issues, and then what are your opportunities? That's where all of this conversation really hits the mark. And Northwest Regional Planning, I'm sure will have some data for us to help us tap into that. Like, we all know that I keep hearing different numbers, but 40% of our current Ashe County population is like people over 65. And the housing folks, Laura Negro says it's likely to go higher in the next 10 years. So that's a trend. What are the issues associated with that aging population? Then we decide what our actions are. The word I would use, like, I love your idea of changes, whether it, because growth and development, those are old world terms, like we can't just keep growing anymore. Like climate change says you can't just keep growing. There's a limit, but maybe it's sustainable change. How do we build in actions for sustainable change, whatever that is? But the actual idea of what's going to happen and how do we plan comes out of those discussions on issues and trends.
Thank you. Mary Jo, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I mean, we are still having growth. So we talked about this a little bit I'm working on the Town of Marengo Comprehensive Plan right now. And from the last decade, we had 24% growth in the Town of Marengo versus the county was 6%. So there is still growth occurring. There's more growth in some areas. And in the Town of Marengo, the average age is in the 40s because we have a lot of large families with young kids. So, I mean, the important thing is we're still going to have growth and development here. And talking about development gives you the opportunity to ask yourselves, what are the things that we value about this county? What are the reasons and the lifestyles and the livelihood for why we live here? How do we want to guide that for the future to preserve those qualities for future generations? What are the sensitive areas, whether they're cultural or environmental or natural resources that we want to protect for the future? And how do we protect those? Do we need to change regulations or strengthen, or how do we want to protect those features? So those are all components of when you're talking about development. We are going to have increases in population here as the temperatures warm and people from the south move north. I already know of people from Texas and Arkansas buying houses in Ashland for when they can't live in Texas anymore. Agriculture is going to be moving north because there's going to be parts of our country that we no longer have water resources or the ability to grow crops. And, we're not going to be able to answer those issues today or in the next year, but when we talk about development, it gives us the opportunity to recognize the things that are sensitive or the things that we want to protect and to develop framework for how we're going to do that for the next 10 to 20 years. That's it.
Patrick?
I like Alyssa's phrase, sustainable change. The population up here was far greater a century ago, with the industry that we had at that time. And this whole thing with growth and development, there's kind of two big points in our history where that, or at least in recent history, was after World War II when we needed a stronger industrial economy, Sputnik going up, needed more scientists and that sort of stuff. And then if you remember, inflation from the late 70s, early 80s, in the presidential race of 80, the big question was, how do you deal with inflation? And the person that got elected said, the way to deal with inflation is to increase the supply of goods so people won't be chasing the goods that are available because they'll understand there won't be a scarcity because there'll be more of it. So they changed the tax laws in 86 to favor the business community to produce more goods. We have been living through what's now 40 years of growth is the holy grail in development. And it kind of bugs me that it's so enculturated. It was a choice that was made by this country through tax policy 40 years ago that puts growth and development above all else, and then the exploitation of natural resources. And so sustainable change, it doesn't mean that we don't have additional housing, but hopefully it means we're more thoughtful, like infill in Ashland, instead of carving up another 40, that's, still pristine or something. So it makes us think harder about these things. And it also, I don't know if we're going to be bigger or not in the future. The state projects us at, I think, 13,325 people in 25 years. And I did look up their methodology for how they project growth, and it is on census data, including women of childbearing age and that sort of stuff. And this is before Northland closed. So they're projecting us to have fewer people. But this idea that if our population as a whole in this county declines, and I don't know what's going to happen, so I'll say if, but it shouldn't be viewed necessarily with a negative connotation. It could be that our quality of life improves because we do better at protecting what's important to us while still having a vibrant enough economy, so that part is worthwhile. In 2014, the Municipality magazine, I think it was 2014, had a front page article on the communities that were growing and thriving. And it wasn't because they figured out economic development. It was because they made the community a place that people wanted to live. Social things to do, good restaurants, quality of life, feeling safe. People came and they figured out what they were going to do for a living, started their business, work remotely. People figured that out, but they were there because they wanted to live there. And so that quality of life is really important. The people will come if you have that quality of life. And it turns out they will largely figure out those details of how they're going to make a living once they get there.
Other discussion? We are at the Northwest Regional Planning Scope of Work. Is there any further discussion on item 5E, Northwest Regional Planning Scope of Work? If not, we're at item 5F, which is working relationship and scheduling with Northwest Regional Planning. Seems to be we may have discussed it. Is there any further comment on the working relationship, Northwest Regional Planning? If not, we move on to item G, which is town inputs to planning. So there is a document which I compose. And so I am suggesting, and see what you all think, but we have asked the county departments to provide input. We have asked the county supervisors on the committees in which they serve to request a discussion of planning ideas and issues, and for that to be recorded in the minutes of the committee meetings. And I would like to send out a request to the town boards in the county to do likewise, to simply put on their agendas an item for discussion of comprehensive planning, and to record any discussion, if they actually have any, in their minutes, so that those minutes would document their comments and be available to us as input. So that's the idea here. And this is laid out in a similar idea of how they would put it on their agenda, similar to the way we're asking our county committees to put it on their agendas. And I know that, some of the committees are already doing this. We have Health and Human Services tomorrow, and Clarence, who chairs that committee, Clarence Campbell, put it, sent out right away, a week and a half ago, to put that on the agenda for the Health and Human Services tomorrow. So is there a comment and discussion on this proposal? Listen.
So you showed me a sample of language, didn't you? At one of the discussions we had, where you're going to invite the town chairs and the village chair to do this process that we're describing of having everybody.
So there is request of each county township board as indicated additional request.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's a great idea.
So I think I will proceed to try to have this happen. I don't think we need a vote on it, as long as there's a consensus here that this is an action we can take. If there's no further discussion on that item, we'll move on to Pat.
I'm just curious, you got 2025 in there. Do we necessarily know from a timeline perspective if we want to limit it to 2025?
Well, I didn't want to overwhelm them, so I thought you can always ask them to do it, continue into 2026, but we would like to have their input before the end of the year, so we can incorporate it in our work. So
was-
that's why I'd like to have them comment before the end of 2025, as we have it as input for consideration. That was a reason for not making it further.
Well, going back to Brad and all these meetings and all this planning and all this scheduling stuff, this says 2025. We're starting with Northwest Regional Planning in August. I'm just not certain or comfortable necessarily knowing that the end of 2025 is it, but we could.
Okay,
I
so
don't
maybe-
know that we know how long we're going to gather input yet.
Could I
That's all.
modify this to say 2025 and early 26?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. That's a great suggestion. Other comments? Okay, moving on to our next item then is, well, this is just a point I wanted to raise, and this is a discussion item, and we're already almost 2 hours, so I don't want to take too much longer. But if you read this, I said, consider the potential for future realignment of some county board committees for greater efficiency and effectiveness. And I gave an example. For example, realign land conservation and forestry and rec committees as a single forestry, land conservation, and committee, and then a separate recreation, parks, and arts committee. So the state statute actually requires us to have a parks commissioner. So I don't think we really have that. And we don't really have anything in the way of county parks, but my interest in having county parks is what brought me to think about the idea that the planning committee can broaden its thinking to consider whether or not the county is properly organized in its corporate functions and its committee functions. I don't think it's something we really want to wrestle with right away. I just wanted to point out that it's not out of the purview of our thinking to consider whether the county is actually organized in its most efficient way, particularly regarding committee structures. So any comments on that subject matter?
I was gonna
Brad?
follow up with I think it's a good idea, especially because this is a standing committee now. But I think we should just kind of kick that can down the road until after December of 2026. Any of that sort of thing. I think that's what this committee can do in the meantime of the 10-year plans. I think I don't think we need to take on more than what we already have.
I would like to state my concurrence with Mr. Ray's comments and Alyssa.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And maybe since you've raised the question, as we go through the next 18 months process, this kind of thing might come up, right? Like, how do we reinvent ourselves as a county governance to be more effective? So I'm thinking of a goal that says the county board should meet in different parts of the county, different parts of the day, and also try to involve youth. And so that, if that stays as an action, that might change or inform different committee structures. Maybe there's a engagement with youth committee or something. All I'm saying is that as we go through the next 18 months, keep your idea in mind so that when we're done, we can really look. This is a time, 10 years, a time for you to look at everything about your county.
Yeah, this came up for me when I went down to the forestry committee meeting about a week ago. Because, well, we have a recreation officer. That's a member of the sheriff's department who deals in enforcement. This is not someone who's planning parks and recreation and amenities for the citizens of the county. So it doesn't seem that recreation is well placed with forestry because the folks in forestry are experts on forestry. So that's what brought it to mind for me. But I totally agree that this is kind of a kick the can down the road in thought, but something to keep in mind as we go through the comp plan process.
And it's ag and extension, and we no longer really are an agriculture-based committee. I'm the only one doing anything with ag or food. We could just be the extension committee.
Well said. Is Mary Jo still with us? She might not. Gary, your thoughts, if any, to contribute?
Well, we want to start politics, you can start them right there because I guarantee you the forestry would have a lot to say about expanding into a committee with somebody else because but that's another topic. If you want to really get into politics, let's talk about the size of the county board. Might as well get to the hot button topics right off the bat.
Again, I think we could wait until January of 2027 to start talking about this.
I agree.
That's after the next election, Gary.
That
Pat?
Well, so the next election is in April of 2026, and then committee assignments have to be made after the election, and these are two-year terms. And so if you are going to reorganize, it's going to take some advanced planning just so you can make committee assignments after an election. I'm going to say, from having been on land and water conservation for a couple of years, or is it 4 years already, or 3 or whatever, I can't imagine that merging with forestry, given the different things they do and what each has on their own plate. I would agree that the Parks and Rec stuff, was put somewhere, and it's not an easy thing. I think the bigger issue with that is, as a county, we, having grown up in Bayfield County and used to a lot of parks over there, it's been kind of eye-opening how relatively little we have in Ashland County. And I think that's an important topic to address, and how it gets addressed, I don't know, at the moment, but it's worth addressing. And maybe the committee's organization is part of why we have relatively little of that, because it's just a very small piece of what a committee has on their plate. The other thing I would suggest is that you look at the state statutes on what committees were required to have and what their charges are, because I know there's guidelines from the state on that, so we will be limited into what we can do also. But if we really are going to do this, I think it's about a 4-year process to think it through and then make those changes and put them in place after an election. And I don't know that we have time to delve with it before 2026, but starting in April of 2026, I could see a 2-year process to consider it.
Other comments on this subject? I've just said, I really think it's a long-term consideration, not any near-term kind of consideration, but with something to be thought about. And maybe it goes into comprehensive planning that it should be thought about. I'm particularly bothered that, from my reading of the statute, that we ought to have a parks commissioner, and we don't. And it's I'd say, I guess it would consider it a personal agenda that the county ought to consider development of maybe one good county park per decade over the coming years. Something, central Ashland County, something southern Ashland County. These are real concrete services to families who live here if we can do it. If there's no further discussion on that topic, we move on to item 5I, which is publicity. And I have a proposal. Dan isn't here today, but my thought was we need to raise the community awareness that this comprehensive plan process is actually taking place. So it's just, if we interviewed 15 different people down on the street right now, and they say, do you know what the Ashland County Comprehensive Plan is being considered? They would say they know nothing about it. So you can think of ways to raise awareness, which means we need to participation of our press, of our newspapers and other outlets. And I thought we could make a bit of a publicity stunt, planting a tree to replace our trees that have just been cut down. I don't know if anybody thinks that's a good idea or a bad idea. I'm just putting it out there. Alyssa?
Love it. I love the idea. And I'm working on a potential project of perennial plants as food. So I'd love to see a little bit of rhubarb out there, and asparagus and blueberry bushes. But I would start with one tree would be great, because I miss those ash trees very much.
Other thoughts and comments? Pat,
What kind of tree are you thinking?
we might need a recommendation from the Land Conservation
The
Department.
forestry.
Well,
Uh,
on the one hand, apparently the oaks, like red oak, have the most food value per tree, but then people generally don't like acorns on their lawn. But even planting that tree raises the question of a lot of things going on. You know, obviously with the ash, that's changing, but some tree species are more suitable for where we're at, you know, now than they used to be. So even picking that tree, I think a rationale could be stated in the context of the times we live and where we live.
Right on.
Makes sense to me. Other comments? Liz,
I think a nice apple tree.
maybe we can do more than one. The other thing I noticed that, you know, out front there's this history display that's been sponsored by Culver's, I think. And we might think about trying to do something similar to that. There would be a display out in front of the courthouse like that to make people aware of the comprehensive plan. And we ought to be brainstorming other ways of raising consciousness that this is going on, because we're not going to get anybody to come to public hearings or public participation if they don't know what's going on. I really like this deal that was created for the 26 version of the plan. That's great. I mean, it costs a little money to put something like this together, but you know, that's a real put up on the bulletin board kind of thing. If we could do something like that again. Yeah. Was Ashland County 2026? I got that from Carisha. So other ideas for publicity, Pat?
Well, I was going to suggest instead of the planning committee, I was going to suggest the planning committee chair, because he's the chair, the county administrator, he's the administrator, the grant writer, because one important reason for having a plan is if you want to apply for grants, it's good to have it in the plan. And maybe that'll trigger some of the townships and folks to say, hey, I'll get more engaged than otherwise, because hey, if we could apply for some grants and there's someone that might help us, that's attractive. And then I think Alyssa, because she's Alyssa and she's extension, and we're going to use extension in the process. And people, I think, often think of extension when they think of comp plans, if they are familiar with this at all. So
What are you signing us up to do?
to do the publicity stuff with the picture in the paper. But seriously, I mean, I think that group would be strategically a good group to include. And I'll speak for myself at least. I'm not sure I would add anything to that picture that the rest of you wouldn't already add.
That's fun, and I think my motion is that we should have a beer and pizza party and come up with ideas on how to promote this. I love the idea of a group picture, because they're like, oh, Pat, he represents me in the county, and so does Bradley, and you know, all of you, and that is a visual stimulation. Plus, a lot of you who are in the southern part of the county, the Glidden paper would pick that up, Morris would pick it up, Mellon paper. You know, I mean, you could really do something fun and jazzy, even with photos, whether it's the tree eventually, but I do love the tree. And actually, I think 3 trees over the last 5 years have been cut down because we lost some pines.
So my notion for the tree publicity is that would be the full committee. And that also gives a chance to say, such and such a person is leading the cultural resources and facilities element, and such a person is leading the agriculture and forestry element. And so it identifies the people on the committee and on the staff who are making contributions to this process and putting a real name and a pace to an effort that the public can see. So I'll talk to Dan about that and see if we make it happen. Pat?
Well, as far as planting a tree, it's, you know, getting a little hard to come by at this point. And if you're buying one that's been bundled up and you might have a root ball that's root bound, you know, some of these places, if they don't sell a tree, they keep it another year and it's all root bound, which isn't good as far as the survival rate of a tree. So if we're going to get a tree, it's got to be we have to decide what tree and make sure it's a source where the survival rate is fairly high, because some of these trees, there was some data out of the state forestry plan I was reading for my own stuff over the winter. I was a little surprised at the survival rates of some of these municipal trees that are planted. It's not so great. So we want to pick the tree we want and then make sure it's a good source. We have a high chance of surviving.
Maybe Chris Hoffman could give us some
Yeah.
input on trees.
I've noticed around the town, just driving today, that there are a number of new trees being planted around the city of Ashland. And out at Misosky Beach, in town here. And in my view, is you hire a nursery to bring in a fairly large, 6-year-old tree and actually do the planting of it. And the committee's therefore to celebrate the planting of it rather than actually doing shovel and watering work. Even though we have some experts on the committee. Erica.
I would be happy to write the press release on that. I think we'd want to think about the length of it. Maybe even including, if we have a finalized grant agreement, if we want to list who's leading each subcommittee, then that's getting kind of long, like talking about the plan, talking about the tree, talking about the grant, so we could roll it out over a couple of, press releases over the next couple of months. But I would also put a plug in for Mary Jo and her people in giving us a vetted list of ideas for trees, because they have the tree sale, they have the expertise. I think that's actually probably better than forestry at this point.
I would suggest just on the press release, refer to a web page that has some of the information we want to do in there anyway.
So I had a call from Tom Stankard yesterday, who's the editor for Daily Press. He wanted to ask me about the Saturday demonstration, which I was very careful about commenting upon. But I mentioned to him about the comprehensive plan process going on forward, and we need to raise public awareness. And he was right on board with that. So I think we ought to get decent cooperation out of at least the Daily Press. Haven't talked to anybody at the Bottom Line yet, or some of these other publications, but it's a good start. Other comments, ideas, thoughts on publicity? If not, we move on to scheduling the next meeting. I have that proposed here for July 15. It's just a pencil-in date. We could see if we actually get a quorum on that date, but it seemed like a good one to me. I think it's a Tuesday at 2:00 in the afternoon.
I'll just let you know that I recently have a staff member leaving, so that I'm going to be short-staffed, and that might mean that I'm gone and will not be able to make day meetings during the month of July. So
Okay. Other thoughts, comments? Okay, so I'm going to pencil that in and have that put on the calendar for now. And then I would like to also just have the calendar penciled in for the second Tuesday of each month at that time. And then we'll just have to work around those penciled in dates. Is there any objection to that process? Second. See, is the 15th the second or the third? It is it. Okay. Well, then I ought to go with the third. Yes. Let me look at the calendar here. Maybe I have some reason. Oh boy, see here. July, August. Okay. So the third, I'll pencil in the third then. Right. Okay. Any other discussion? We have item number 7 is a second public comment period. Is there anybody for public comment online? Not seeing anybody, no one present. We're going to move on to item number 8, which is committee review of public comments, but there were no public comments, so I don't think we have anything to say there. Pat?
Well, as far as penciling in dates, the county keeps a calendar, and then as committees schedule meetings, they look at the calendar to see what's open. And so I think the question is, when we talk about penciling in, are we actually setting those in the county calendar so that this room is set aside then, and we don't have other meetings potentially getting scheduled during that time?
Yeah, my intention is to get them on the county calendar.
So that's what penciling in is.
Put them on the
meaning.
county calendar, but for the members of the committee to understand that they could be changed if we need to change them. You can put it on the calendar because you know, up until a week in advance of the meeting, you can change the date or you can cancel the meeting.
Well, when I look at September, I've got a county board meeting that morning, but we're looking at meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Sometimes finance or zoning have been meeting in the afternoon, which I'm on, and Brad's on finance. So if we, by penciling in, if we're actually going to have on the county calendar these dates popping up, then because right now I need to talk to Brad about scheduling a finance meeting, and I need to know what's available, what isn't. I mean, do we want to go out to the end of the year and pencil, you know, on the calendar, schedule the third Tuesday, or what is it? Whatever day of the week it is.
My view is that, yes, I'd like to get our bid in for these times and dates. I think if they need to be changed, that Gary could make that call about what's the priority. But I would like to, raise our hand and say we'd like to have these time slots.
So the third Tuesday of each month, without looking at Thanksgiving and Christmas here. That's,
I think it works on all months, actually. It's the 18th of November.
It will work out really well because I think the county board, they just set like
the last one.
the fourth, except
Yeah.
in September. It's
Yeah.
the fourth Tuesday of every month going through. And so other than September, the third Tuesday works. I would suggest that we go ahead and think about a different time because I can't take the whole day off. We have a 9 o'clock and then a 2 o'clock. I just can't do that.
Yeah.
So I would say September, we either go the 2nd or the 4th. And, but other than that, go ahead and do it. If I get stuff on my calendar, there's a better chance I don't schedule something else over it. There's always going to be conflicts with me, but there's a better chance that I can make it if it's on my calendar further in advance.
Okay.
So that's why I have to schedule my vacation into May, early June. Now it's already scheduled for next year. I don't know what I'm doing, but it's already scheduled.
Okay. So definitely be reconsidered at our next meeting in July then. This whole idea of future meetings.
Well, I just wanted to understand when we say pencil in, am I writing on my calendar, penciling it in? But if it's not showing up on the county calendar, others could schedule a meeting, sometimes of which I'm on that too. And then,
Yeah, I
unlike
intend to put
Alyssa, I can only be in one place at one time.
I intend to put these on the county calendar with the understanding that, you know, you can change it.
Okay.
Okay. Summary comments, item number 9, I'll allow summary comments. Thoughts to share? Okay, Gary, summary comments? Sorry, summary comments. Gary, anything to be added?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, recommendations for future agenda items. Anybody have something they specifically want to put on the agenda? Lisa?
Can we roll over that one about your photo opping? Because that'll be a July meeting with regional planning coming on in August. That might be a nice prepper. And then maybe in August, when regional planning comes on, there's something else jazzy that you could do part 2 or, you know.
Other suggestions for future agenda items, Erica?
I would just suggest that we stick to the calendar. The scope of work has month 3 as setup, plan, update, webpage. So maybe we work toward that and make sure that that is on board by the next meeting. It also adds engage local units of government and then issue press releases announcing plan. So we are doing all of that, but maybe just make sure that we've worked toward it and then we're kind of checking it off at that meeting.
So get your haircuts the day before the
Any other suggestions for the next meeting? If not, can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
Brad, so moved.
Mr. Ray moves to adjourn. Second, please.
Pat, will second.
Mr. Kinney moves to second. Discussion. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Meeting is adjourned to the public access session. If there are any public wanting to talk to us.